Everybody, welcome to another episode of 6-Year Snippets. Today we're going to be focusing on another theme that we've been thinking about over these past few years, wanting to grow in as a ministry, and that theme is justice. So to start us off, Alan, what do we mean by that word justice, and what does this word have to do with the church?
It's a great question, because I think in today's context, a lot of things are meant by the word social justice. And I am by no means an expert. Most of the stuff I've just been learning and reading from conferences like the Ethnos Conference that was hosted by the Village in Baltimore, authors such as Tim Keller. What I've come to understand is that justice is really just treating people fairly, equitably, and righteously. It is a characteristic and a reflection of who God is, that He is fair and just, and it's something He has called us as His saints and His people to live in, to walk justly and to live righteously in our relationships and our communities. So justice, in essence, is really an aspect of how we're called to live as Christians.
Yeah, that's good. Yeah, I know for some people, they take issue with addressing justice in the church because they view it as a political thing, but I like how you're connecting justice to the very essence of who God is and how we're called to live justly because He is a just God. So in that regard, how have you seen our church growing over the last few years in recognizing and engaging with our need for justice?
I think one of the biggest ways is that we're becoming more aware that, yes, we are at Hopkins, but also we're in Baltimore City. And whether we intended it or not, God brought us here to be involved in some way in our city. I think we've also had, in the past, we've had a lot of individuals at Stepping Stone who individually pursued loving and being involved in the city. But these last 2 years, I think we've been growing more as a church to become more aware and involved in the city. Situations like the Baltimore uprising where Freddie Gray's arrest and death led us to realize the pervasiveness of sin beyond just the individual level. And to be clear, sin is absolutely individual. The heart of Christianity is the gospel, which deals with our internal transformation and our dealing with our sin before God. But I think a lot of things we've overlooked in the past is that because people are sinful, the structures and systems that they create can also perpetuate sin. And I liked what one of my seminary professors actually said. He said that cultures are prisons of sin. They cause us to engage in sin and to be blind to it without even knowing. So in Baltimore City, there are ways where historically people have used their power and advantage to abuse and to gain unfair advantages over others, over people without power. And this has taken place directly and explicitly upon racial lines, so that groups of people today are still severely disadvantaged by systems that are still perpetuating that.
Yeah, it's been really great seeing people in Stepping Stone becoming more aware of things happening in Baltimore and the nation, even though I know a big temptation is to get stuck in the Hopkins bubble while we're here. I think a big part of that has been the Baltimore missions trip. Those have played a big role in helping us open our eyes to that. So could you speak a little bit to the Baltimore missions trips over the past few years?
Yeah, so last year we started our first Baltimore missions trip in 5 years. It's been 5 years. It was just an exploration trip. It was just trying to get closer, build relationships with local churches, and see what God just has for us to do. We realized that we're not going to be fixing anything anytime soon, but what we can do is simply just to be present and to just care by being involved. And so we've been building a great relationship with Graffiti Church in Greenmount, and that partnership has been particularly fruitful, with students frequently going over now to help with their tutoring and their Bible study, their Bible program after school at the rec center. One student who actually went on last year's missions trip, in addition to this year's, actually devoted his entire summer last year to helping out with their interning at the church and helping out with their summer camp. So this last month we had our second trip, and it was awesome just to continue with that. We also did some street evangelism. We talked to people. We offered to pray with them, with our partner churches. And sometimes we were able to share the gospel. Sometimes we were just praying and just hearing about people's struggles and just trying to be present. It was also a time of growth for our team personally, for them to be able to just take steps of faith in this classic mission trip way and sharing their testimonies and talking to people they don't know. It was also challenging for our team to think about their place at Hopkins and the city and to care about what's going on outside of Hopkins. So a lot of students on our trip were actually freshmen, so I'm excited to see what they'll do with the rest of their time in Baltimore City.
Yeah, that's super exciting. And winding back a year, I know last year we had a whole Friday night series, 3 different services devoted to racial reconciliation as well. And we heard about some of the injustices in the history of Baltimore in particular, and that really helped us to understand some of what we saw and experienced on last year's trip and this year's as well. And part of that series too is focused on racial diversity. Many of us know that Stepping Stone has traditionally been pretty lacking in racial diversity, and having those Friday nights focused on race was really fruitful for us.
Right.
We talked about whether we as a church really even value racial diversity, considered ways that we might even unintentionally be causing brothers and sisters from different racial backgrounds to feel unwelcome, as if they didn't belong in our church. And so talking through those things openly and honestly was a really great way for us to take steps forward as a ministry.
Yeah. It's been great, but I think we still have a lot of work to do. At the end of the day, I think all of this is just us trying to follow Jesus better and just trying to love people better in what we do. Even in all of this, I think we're still striving for greater understanding and practice of grace in our lives, even as we receive grace from God, that grace we give to others.
Amen. So that's all for this episode of 6-Year Snippets. Thanks for tuning in. See you guys next time.